Welcome back to Movies in a Nutshell. Today we're talking about The Old Guard, an American superhero film from 2020. 4 fatally injured people lay on the ground. Andromache Andy of Scythia narrates that she is tired of this life, saying that the group has repeatedly been in the same situation. A few days earlier, Andy and Booker are one half of a team, walking in the streets of Morocco, Italy. Andy sees a group of women taking a group selfie and accidentally gets caught in a picture. Andy offers to take a picture of them instead, so she can delete the photo with her face. In a hotel room, Andy and Booker reunite with Joe and Nikki, the other half of their team, talking about their upcoming work. After a while, Andy and Booker go to the market to meet up with their client, a former CIA agent named James Copley. Their assignment is to rescue kidnapped students in South Sudan who were taken after an attack at their school. By accepting, the team breaks their rule of never working with the same client twice. Not long after, the team is landing in a desert in South Sudan. When the night falls, Andy, Booker, Joe, and Nikki enter the base where the kidnapped children are being kept. When they get to the room that supposedly housed the captured children, the team is ambushed. The soldiers open fire on the team, killing all of them. As the soldiers start to leave, the team's wounds start to heal rapidly, the bullets in their bodies being pushed out by their healing muscles. By the time the soldiers are ready to fight back, the team kills them all. Copley is watching the mission from afar via CCTV footage. Andy, Booker, Joe, and Nikki are revealed to be centuries-old immortal warriors with inhuman healing abilities. They have dedicated their lives to helping those in need for hundreds of years. They use their experience to work as mercenaries, taking missions that specifically help others. When they discover that Copley knows what they are, the team decides to track him down. In Afghanistan, a group of U.S. Marines is assisting locals. Niall Freeman, one of the soldiers, is tasked with rescuing women who have been kidnapped by terrorists. Niall and her companions shoot the man responsible, but he is wanted alive, so they try to save him. Before Niall can do anything, her throat is slit by the dying terrorist. Her partner cries out for assistance, and medics rush to her aid, despite the wound being too deep for her to have survived. Niall lives. Somewhere, Andy, Booker, Joe, and Nikki all have a vision of Niall being killed. They conclude that she's the next immortal, the first one in over 200 years. Joe starts writing down what they can remember about the vision so they can find Niall. After some argument, Andy volunteers to retrieve Niall, while the rest of the team continues to look for Copley. In Afghanistan, Niall's co-workers and superiors are surprised and wary that her neck has healed so well, not even leaving a scar. She is isolated and pushed away, one of her friends calling her a freak. Meanwhile, Copley is in London for a press conference hosted by his employer, Stephen Merrick. The man is a multi-billionaire businessman who wishes to promote his company, Merrick Pharmaceuticals. Copley shows Merrick the video of Andy and the group, demonstrating how quickly they recover from injuries without medical attention. Merrick is intrigued and plans to capture the mercenaries to find out their secrets and use it to his company's advantage. At the Marine base in Afghanistan, Niall is informed that she's being sent to Germany for testing. Niall is instructed to pack her bags, but when other soldiers start to escort her to a ride, Andy shows up and forcefully takes Niall. Niall tries to escape, but Andy shoots her in the head. When she wakes up again, Niall finally realizes that she's immortal. Andy brings Niall back in the car, promising to explain everything later. They make it to an airbase, finding a pilot willing to take them to France. During the flight, Niall learns about the group of immortals like herself. Andy eventually falls asleep, only to wake up with their arm tied. Niall is holding the pilot at gunpoint, demanding that he land the plane. Andy demands the pilot release her, but Niall continues to threaten him. Andy speaks Russian and suddenly shoots the pilot, making Niall panic. Andy orders Niall to release her so she can fly the plane, and Niall reluctantly follows the order. When she discovers that Andy told the pilot to play dead, Niall starts to fight Andy. Niall is easily subdued by Andy and eventually gives up the fight. They meet up with Booker, Joe, and Nikki in France a few hours later. For the first time, the Immortals eat dinner together. The group describes to Niall how they have witnessed and participated in several historical events. Each person talks about how they discovered their immortality, all except for Andy. It's also revealed that, while their abilities are powerful, there's a chance they'll stop working at any time. This had happened in the past when Lycon, a previous immortal, died due to unhealed wounds. That night, Niall wakes up sweaty because of a nightmare. She reveals that she had a vision of a woman trapped in an iron coffin. The others are surprised and explain who the woman is. Quinn was one of the first of the Immortals, Andy's former partner. They were caught in England trying to free so-called heretics from the witch trials. All the punishments couldn't kill them, so the people take Quinn and force her into an Iron Maiden. She was cast into the sea, where Quinn has been for the past 500 years, dying over and over again. The Immortals have tried looking for her, but they were never successful. Niall says she could feel Quinn's pain and rage. Niall leaves, and Andy follows her. Niall is angry and doesn't think what's happening is good, and Andy disputes that they can't do anything about it. Andy promises to keep her safe, but before they finish their talk, they hear noise from the hideout. It turns out that people sent by Merrick have attacked the hideout, and Booker was injured enough that he took longer to heal. Niall can't find both Joe and Nikki, who were taken. Andy finds more of the men trying to capture the Immortals and kills them. She manages to escape with Niall and Booker. In the back of a vehicle, Joe and Nikki are tied up with soldiers guarding them. Joe tries to wake up Nikki, who is slow to recover. While Nikki starts to wake up, the soldiers are amused by Joe's concern. They mockingly ask if Joe and Nikki are a couple. Joe calls the soldiers infants and waxes poetic about how Nikki is more to him than the soldiers can hope to understand. Joe and Nikki's vehicle stops by a plane, and it's revealed the two have killed all the soldiers with them. They are then transported to a plane to take them to Merrick. In Val d'Aoun, France, Andy brings Niall and Booker to an abandoned mine they found many years ago. Andy apparently keeps her old stuff in the mine, and Niall finds many things that fascinate her. While she's exploring, Andy orders Booker to start finding Copley so they can also find Joe and Nikki. Andy realizes her wound from the earlier fight hasn't healed yet, but doesn't tell anyone. Joe and Nikki arrive in Merrick's building, Merrick himself present to greet them. The multi-billionaire stabs Joe multiple times to prove that they are actually immortal, and the wounds heal instantly. Merrick's primary researcher is excited to see the wounds heal instantly, and his men knock Joe and Nikki out to transport them and retrieve their DNA, blood, and tissue, among others. Copley asks Merrick to let the Immortals go now that they have what they need, but Merrick doesn't want them to go to competitors before they've unlocked the Immortals' genetic code. Andy is outside the hideout the next morning, holding a photograph of Niall's family. Niall is the only Immortal with a family that's still alive. Niall realizes she'll have to spend the majority of her life without her mother and younger brother, and wants to spend her family's remaining life with them. She refuses to participate in the mission, and Andy lets her go. Niall discovers that the gun Andy gave her was empty, the same gun that Booker handed Andy. She returns to assist Andy after discovering the empty gun cartridge. Meanwhile, Andy and Booker have entered Copley's place and are about to attack him. But Booker reveals his alliance with Copley and shoots Andy in the back. Booker says he's tired of being immortal and thinks that Merrick can find a way for them to die. However, Booker soon discovers Andy isn't healing and demands Copley help him get her out. Before they can even carry Andy, Merrick and his men show up at the house. Booker tries to stop them, but he is knocked out in the process. Copley tries to stop Merrick too, but he is also knocked out. After that, Booker and Andy are taken to the lab. Merrick orders that Andy is kept alive at all costs. Meanwhile, Niall arrives searching for Andy and Booker, discovering Copley in his home. He reveals all that he's found about Andy, all her accomplishments, all the people she's saved, and all her direct contribution to the survival of important people who have changed the world. Copley confesses that he gave the Immortals up to help cure disease in a misguided attempt to gift something to the world. Copley reveals to Niall that Andy didn't heal and offers the location of Merrick's lab. Copley helps Niall sneak into Merrick's research building. Niall finds Merrick, but she is too slow to shoot him down. His men attack her, forcing her to flee. Niall accidentally finds the room containing the Immortals, and she hands Andy a gun and tells her that she made a promise to save Joe and Nikki, immortal or not. The two of them release the boys, though Booker is willing to stay. Joe is all for leaving Booker, but both Andy and Niall believe no man should be left behind. Following their release, the team goes outside and kills all of Merrick's men. They make sure that Andy is unharmed by taking shots that would have hurt her. Merrick discovers a special battle axe that Niall brought and decides to use it to protect himself. The team is ambushed and splits up, but Andy kills more men with a fireman's axe she found in the emergency exit. Andy splits up from Booker and Niall, going after Merrick herself, but the team reunites while she's interrogating one of Merrick's men. They find out Merrick is in the penthouse and split up again. This time, Niall and Andy go one way while the boys go the other. Niall and Andy stop just before Merrick's penthouse, and Andy is bleeding a lot. Niall wants Andy to wear bulletproof armor, but Andy is willing to accept her fate. Their signal comes when Joe slams through the penthouse window like Tarzan, but Booker sees the elevator go down. The boys follow the elevator while Niall and Andy stay in the broken penthouse, discussing Andy's limited life. Suddenly, Merrick shows up, having used the elevator to lure the others down. He calls Andy selfish and points a gun at her, but doesn't shoot. It looks like a stalemate, but Niall pretends to shoot at Andy at her cue, confusing Merrick, who tries to shoot Niall. Andy shoves Merrick's dropped battle axe in his shoulder, but he still tries to shoot her. Luckily, Niall puts herself in front of Merrick's gun and pushes him out of the broken penthouse window. Both of them fall from the building into a car, killing Merrick. In an old bar in Great Britain, the Immortals are deciding Booker's fate. While Joe, Nikki, and Andy talk about what price Booker can pay, Niall tells Booker that Copley can make it look like she was killed in action and that her family will move on. A while later, Andy tells Booker that the team agreed to meet him in the same spot 100 years from today. Booker says he won't see her again, but Andy tells him to have faith. Back at Copley's place, Andy, Joe, Nikki, and Niall look through the evidence Copley compiled. There are connections to all of them from the past 150 years, saving people who pioneer things in the future. They take Copley into their team to help them disappear from being found like that again and find them missions that will help them make a difference. In Paris, Booker drunkenly walks back to his apartment building. When he hears a noise from his apartment itself, he cautiously enters, finally meeting Andy's former partner, Quinn. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that notification bell to see more from Movies in a Nutshell.